We're going to call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pursuant to the NJSA 10:4, the Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this special reorganization meeting of the Jackson Township Zoning Board of Adjustment has been published and posted in all appropriate locations. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman? Dr. Hofstein? Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnaz? Ms. Rosal? Mr. Martins?
Here.
Mr. Such? Mr. Bessie? Ms. Bradley?
Here. Next up are our resolutions. We do have three for this evening. Resolution 2025-01. I'm sorry? Oh, no, I thought Dr. Hudson said something. I apologize. Resolution 2025-01, resolution of the Zoning Board of the Township of Jackson approving settlement agreement by way of consent order and granting use variance for a change of use as to the detached garage and preliminary and final site plan approval for a 340-square-foot addition to the accessory structure on property located at 28 Ashford Road, Block 6202, Lot 15. Eligible to vote are Mr. Hyman, Dr. Hofstein, Mr. Hudak, Ms. Rosal, Mr. Martins, and Ms. Bradley.
Motion to approve?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak? Ms. Rosal? Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. Resolution 2025-02, resolution of the Zoning Board of the Township of Jackson granting amended site plan approval with use variance relief to permit construction of an automobile paint booth on property located at 370 and 375 Faraday Avenue, Block 22010, Lot 4.02. Eligible to vote are Mr. Hyman, Dr. Hofstein, Mr. Hudak, Ms. Rosal, Ms. Parnes, and Ms. Bradley.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnaz? Ms. Rosal? Ms. Bradley?
Yes. And Resolution 2025-03, resolution of the Zoning Board of the Township of Jackson granting time extension for development related to preliminary and final site plan approval with minor subdivision as previously granted on property located at 1235 East Veterans Highway, Block 13801, lots 4.01, 5, and 6.01. Eligible to vote are Mr. Hyman, Dr. Hofstein, Mr. Hudak, Ms. Rosal, Mr. Martins, and Mrs. Bradley.
Motion to approve?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak? Ms. Rosal? Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. Elizabeth, do we have any minutes this evening?
No, Madam Chair.
And do I have a voucher for you for this evening?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right. No announcements, but we are going to have executive session this evening. As you're aware, this is our reorganization meeting. So as far as executive session, I will now articulate a resolution to enter executive session. I will need one member to move to approve and adopt the resolution, a second, and a roll call. Whereas the Zoning Board of the Township of Jackson is subject to certain requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4, and whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-12, provides that an executive session not open to the public may be held for certain specified purposes when authorized by resolution, and whereas it is necessary for the Zoning Board of the Township of Jackson to discuss in a session not open to the public matters relating to the item or items authorized by NJSA 10:4-12B. This evening, those matters being personnel, specifically the reorganization and appointment of the board's professionals. And now, therefore be it resolved by the zoning board of the Township of Jackson to enter executive session for discussion of personnel and more specifically the board's professionals. It is anticipated that the deliberations conducted in closed session may be disclosed to the public upon the determination that public interest will no longer be served by such confidentiality. As requested, may I have a motion to approve and adopt this resolution?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Normally, these closed sessions are for personnel, personnel being somebody here or a professional you may have on contract that you want to address the issue. I've never really seen it done for when you're trying to hire or look at professionals that you want to put on the board. Normally, that's done out in public trust. I don't really see that, that's a stretch of the word of personnel, and I don't see how that fits into that, in that category. I believe the professional appointment should be debated out here in public, in the public's interest, and do it that way. Over the years, that's how I've always seen it. So I'm really, I think the word in that whole thing being personnel is really being stretched. I don't really see the need for a closed session on appointing professionals. That's my only opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Since I've been on the board, that's how it's been done. So this is what we normally, this is why I shouldn't say normally, this is what's been normal since I've been on the board. Anyone else have any input?
When I first joined the board many years ago, the first couple of years, that's how it was done publicly. And then after that, it's the last 9 or 10 years, it's always been done executive session and then voted on in
In
public
public, right.
when we come back.
Right.
That
So
brings the
there's a
question,
public vote.
in closed session, you're going to be discussing in a caucus that has a full board there of what you're doing outside. That should be done outside in public. Doesn't meet the criteria to be in a closed session.
Mr. President, I think it's very presumptuous of you to bring up these points on your very first meeting. I find that ridiculous.
I've been called other things. I have no problem with that. I've also been on some land use boards and been through this stuff, and that's why I bring it up, because it caught my attention, that's all. Thank you.
Through the chair,
Yes.
I would comment that I would like to refrain from going into executive session. I do have concern with going to executive session without professional guidance and advice, exactly what may and may not be discussed. I don't think it's a good idea to enter executive session. I would make a motion to deny.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I feel like this is a matter for an attorney to weigh in on. And I know that that's part of what we have to address, but I guess I'm just thinking out loud, like, I mean, none of us really, we could weigh in and we could say what we've seen, but I'm just thinking out loud, like, what if there was, I mean, I know part of one of the professionals that we want to appoint is an attorney, but maybe having the discussion or deliberation around an executive session be done after we appoint an attorney, so that at least we have the advice of an attorney. Just an idea. I mean, I know there's still, that discussion around that professional, but, maybe it could at least help with the rest of the personnel issues.
Yeah,
Jeff,
if I could
sorry,
just
Mr. Martins, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to chime in with my opinion. So I am surprised that this is all even coming up now. So we discussed about having this special meeting to go to the reorg, to go into executive session with an attorney there when we did that some time ago. We all agreed that that was the right thing to do. Now, I understand we have a new member and he has a different opinion, that's okay. But what's the, I don't understand, I'm sorry, why are you bringing this up now when we agreed we were going to do this?
I think it's
You know,
obvious
not for
that
nothing.
there's a play going on here, that there's certain members of this board that are in on appointments.
Right.
And that's where they were appointed as a full-fledged member, where we have alternates that should have been moved up instead of someone being thrust upon.
I'm sorry, I'm thrust upon you. Mr. Hudak.
Through the chair, if I may.
Can I just ask a
Oh, I
question?
thought he
I'm
was
sorry.
finished. I'm
Can I
sorry.
just ask a question first? Jeff, I don't mean to put you on the spot. You've been on the board, again, as Ms. Barnes pointed out, and as I'm kind of stuck up here, and I'm tempted to ask Brent. From my, so I was going to ask Jeff and Brent. Jeff, you've been doing this way longer than me. Since I've been on the board, this is the way it's been done. That's the guidance I've always had from the prior attorney and the attorney that was serving. Guidance here?
It's my understanding that whoever the attorney was up until he's not, is the attorney that would be representing the board. I'll defer to Mr. Pullman on that.
Mr. Rapuro is correct that under law of the state of New Jersey, that a attorney for a municipality or a board is appointed for either a fixed period of time or until the board, obviously any public entity, has a right to terminate the relationship of their attorney at any time. And there can never be a period of time where a public entity actually is without counsel. I'll tell you that myself. I've sat as counsel for public entities where I knew I would no longer be sitting as counsel after that. But a board should always have counsel, and you always do have counsel. And if you have appointed counsel, they can answer your questions. As I have been appointed as special counsel for the township, I can represent to you that I do have a significant amount of experience in board governance. If you have any specific questions for me, I don't want this board to be without counsel, although you have prior appointed counsel. But if you do have questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer them for you this evening.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
there is a motion on the floor.
Yep.
I'll second that motion.
A motion to deny executive session, you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
If there's a motion on the floor to deny, we can have a vote. I'd like to give Mr. Murphy I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
The fact that it seems like we do have an option of asking council
Correct.
before we vote, I would love to hear, it seems like we could be represented by two attorneys in this one. It's better than zero.
Right. Mr. Murphy,
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Then a yes vote means to deny the public session.
correct. And a no vote means
To have,
to
a no vote is to have,
not have a public
and not
session.
have a public
Right.
session.
Yes is to deny. Mr. Murphy?
Madam Chair, I take no issue with the motion that's pending on the floor. This can be done in executive session. You may have discussions regarding personnel in executive session. It is not a stretch that board professionals are personnel of the board. Notwithstanding, it can also be done in public. So I have no issue with the pending motion, and if that's the way that the board would prefer to do it this time around, that would be perfectly acceptable.
Sorry, can I just ask,
Yes.
being an alternate, will I be voting on
Well,
this?
I'm just going to ask that question of Mr. Murphy. So Mr. Bressi was appointed as a regular member, not an alternate, so he does have a vote based on his appointment. However, do alternates vote as well on the motion?
No, Madam Chair.
Not on the motion, okay.
Not on professional appointments either.
No, not on the motion though either?
No, not
Okay.
on the motion, not on
Professional, right.
professional.
All right.
Thank you.
So Mr. Such and Mr. Martins will not be voting on the motion nor the professional appointments. So we do have a motion on the floor to deny executive session, and there was a second by Mr. Hyman. So a yes vote means we want executive session. We're going to deny the motion. Right, did I say that wrong, Jeff? Yeah, so yes means we do not want executive session, and no means, a no vote says we do want executive session. Roll call, please, Elizabeth.
Mr. Hyman?
I just want to comment that I would like this to be done in public, and yes.
Dr. Hofstein?
No.
Mr. Hudak?
No.
Ms. Parnas?
Honestly, I have no issue with discussing this in public, and, I mean, I don't have clarity from an attorney on whether we can or cannot discuss this in executive. That I don't feel like I have clarity on, but I'm not opposed to discussing it, in public. So I guess to err on the side of caution, I would vote yes to the motion to deny. Just because I don't have clarity on the executive piece of it.
Oh, I thought Mr. Murphy was, well,
It was clear that you can discuss it in public as well, and I think, well, that's the, you know, I'm not opposed to that, so I feel like that's the safer option.
Ms. Rosal? Yes or no?
Sure, I'm opposed to discuss it publicly as well. So,
Mr. Bressy?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
no, and let me just add, I too am a little taken back. Obviously, we welcome all the new members. Forgive me for being rude, Mr. Such and Mr. Bressy, but I'm a little taken back that it was waited till now to have this discussion. Something could have been brought up. We have emails. I was here. Nobody discussed anything. So I do have a bit of a problem with how this was handled. And I'd have to agree with Mr. Hudak's comments. And I think we need to take a step back and remember we're all supposed to be working together and not against one another. This is not a political situation. Let me be abundantly clear. This is a quasi-judicial board, and we're supposed to be working better to do better and serve better the residents of Jackson. So the
was,
motion to deny executive session
4 yeses, 3 nos.
was approved. So the discussions will take place out here.
Through the chair.
Yes?
If I could just make a comment, I did bring up to Mr. Murphy on a phone call recently about an issue that, about the guidance, exactly what you may and may not discuss in executive session. I do not have clarity on the exact details, what you may or may not discuss. And we have not had, in the past year that I'm on this board, I have not been given any specific advice what we can and cannot discuss. The majority of the time, the attorney is in the room. When it does come to appointing professionals, the attorney is not in the room, and I do not think it's a good idea. That is why I believe it should be done in the public, and until we have clear, concise guidance on what may and may not be discussed in executive, it's not a good idea. Thank you.
So we'll move forward and look at our board professionals. We can start off with our engineer. The two in question are Morgan Engineering and Surveying and Remington and Vernon Engineers. Comments, issues, input?
Through the chair.
Yes.
I've met with many of the RFPs. I've interviewed them. I've had discussions with them, with their experience. We actually have somebody representing from Morgan Engineering here. I did meet with Mark. He has a lot of years of experience working for TNM, for Morgan, and I think that he would be a suitable candidate for the job.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair, I've met with somebody else from Morgan & Morgan also. I'm very familiar with Remington and Vernick. I've worked with them for a lot of years, too. As far as for the engineer, I could support a motion to hire Morgan Engineering Surveying, Mark Wermeyer.
Well, we haven't had a
I
motion
would
yet,
hope
so
that you
let's-
withdraw the motion until everybody's had a chance to.
Right, well, he
speak.
said support a motion, so we haven't had a motion yet. So go ahead, Dr. House.
And we're just discussing.
Initial question I have is,
Yeah.
these meetings that you had with the people from Morgan Engineering, in what capacity was that?
I've met with I went to interview them on my own. I'm
Is
allowed to
that- Is
interview.
that permissible on
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
own to interview somebody?
I reached out, I did my due diligence, and I reached out to the RFPs. Absolutely.
I've never heard of that before.
Sorry?
Who did you speak to?
What do you mean, who did I speak to?
Who did you meet with? You said you met with
I
representatives.
said I met with Mark Romeyer. That's what I said.
And did you meet with Remington Burdick as well?
It doesn't make a difference who I met with.
Answer the
We,
question.
I don't need to answer your question. I've met
Okay.
with, I've met with professionals.
Excuse me. We're all adults here, let's act like it. Okay? Mr. Bresci and Mr. Hyman have expressed some support for Morgan Engineering. Any other comments? I'd like.
Yeah,
oh,
we're
go
not
ahead.
I'd
done.
like to say, it's obvious to me that there's a big power play going on here, and then we have a new member who came in, who is influenced by others, who is influencing board members here, and it stinks to high heaven. It's so obvious what's happening here. You guys are sitting here doing it.
I just,
It's awful.
I also have to add to this, that you said that you did your due diligence and you interviewed somebody from Morgan. I mean, it's not fair. You should have interviewed everybody who
So-
came in.
so for the
If you're
record, I-
interviewing one person, you
so for the
should be
rec-
obligated to interview all the others.
Okay,
If
so
you want, why don't you interview them
so I
right
did.
now if they're
I
here?
spoke to RV.
Hmm?
I said I spoke with RV
And
also.
who'd you speak to there?
It doesn't make a difference.
It does
I-
make a
I-
difference.
I-
But it does,
I've done
excuse me,
my due-
excuse me, it does make a difference. Okay, excuse me, you put on the record, Mr. Murphy has taught us over the last number of years that I've been on this board, when we talk about an application and we admit that we went to the property, we need to put that on the record. You, Mr. Hyman, put on the record that you interviewed and did your due diligence. You admitted you met with Mark. Who did you meet with at Remington and Vernon?
I've had discussions with Mr. Dittenhofer, I believe his name is.
So I just have a question for you. You met with someone, so Ernie has served this board for quite some time, but you didn't feel the need to speak to him, although he's been guiding us since you've been on this board, prior to you being on this board, to be factual.
That is correct. He is currently our planner. I mean, he was our planner and possibly will be our planner based on this board's decision. So I think if he's going to be the planner, we should have another individual to be the engineer.
I could
So I
agree
have a
with that,
question.
but just a question, is CME still an applicant in this? And is Harbor Consultants still?
Well, on the last, so this was a conversation that I asked as well, and it is my understanding that the two RFPs that are on the table for engineering at this time are Morgan and Remington. There was apparently a rebid, unbeknownst to the board, but apparently there was a rebid. For whatever reason, I can't answer, so please don't ask. I don't know. I'm just being honest. And so the only two on the board at this point are Morgan Engineering and Remington and Vernon.
Oh, I thought they were an additional, and Mr. Hill withdrew.
Well, there was before Mr. Hill withdrew, there was a rebid. Like I said, unfortunately, Dr. Hobson, I can't tell you why, because I don't know.
Okay. Who would be representing the Morgan engineering firm?
Is that a question I can ask?
If it's set, Madam Chairman, if it's set forth in the special qualification document you received, generally it says who the point of contact or the lead engineer or planner will be.
Well, we know with Remington that there's one person who represents them before this board, except if he can't make it. Will we have something similar for Morgan when they're represented? Or do we have a different engineer every meeting?
So I would comment that they also have in the RFP that Matthew Wilder was also part of the proposal.
They had
So
three
then why would
people
you interview
mentioned in
Mark?
that. There were three people in that
That is correct. And
So we want, like to know who will be the one whom we will see the majority of the time.
Right. Mr. Murphy, Mr. Pullman, I have a question for you. Mr. Hudak and Dr. Hofstein, excuse me, did bring up a point, and I didn't want them to think I ignored their comment. I did hear it. I just wanted to let them finish that discussion. Doing his due diligence and interviewing the candidates, is that allowed?
My understanding is that so long as it was done on his own volition, by himself, without others present, then that would be permissible.
Thank you.
I concur with Mr. Murphy, so long as that it was not done in the context of what would constitute a formal board meeting or board action, then it would be permissible.
Thank you. So we've had some support from Morgan Engineering. Any other comments? Yes, please. No, but you can still contribute to discussion, absolutely.
Last time we met, what was going before, what's happening now, it's like a whole new board, a whole different dynamics that we have. All I know is one new person, and I don't know anybody, but that's just my observation. After 300%, the dynamics of the board has dramatically changed in this new year. And I don't understand why.
Thank you. Well, I've sat on this board, and since I came on, Remington and Verdict was the township planner. Given that we no longer have Evan, we've lost a vast amount of knowledge. Evan, I think I can speak for all of us, we were very comfortable. He was great with the applicants, very informative, very helpful, and he worked extremely well with Mr. Peters from Remington and Vernick. Given the vast dynamics of Jackson and the changing town, I feel that it would be in our best interest to appoint Remington and Vernick and Mr. Peters, who would be representing them, to represent us with all the changes. We need somebody who is intimately knowledgeable about Jackson. He's worked in a variety of different capacities. I think given all the change, we have to be very sensitive to that we still need, again, the reason this board exists is to assist the residents of Jackson and help them. And I think that Mr. Peters has shown all along that he's willing to do that. He puts the time in. And not only that, we also have to think about what goes on behind the scenes. At many meetings, we've heard about the different meetings they've had with the applicants and the time they put in outside of here. And to have somebody completely new come in who's not familiar with how it all is done in that position, when we've had somebody in that role, Evan in that role for so long, I think is a difficult transition. Having someone who's been here, knows the process, works well with Jeff, worked very well with Evan, I think we'd be better served to have him in the engineer capacity. Before the question comes up, I do not recommend that we would have him in both roles, just to be clear. I'm recommending them for engineering. I don't think we'd all be well-served. We don't want, number one, we don't want to stretch him too thin. Don't forget, he is involved in other things as well. So I am not suggesting that he be both. I'm suggesting that Remington and Vernick be named the engineer. Ms. Parnes.
So I agree that, having experience with the town is a big benefit, and losing Evan is, it's with all his experience and guidance, that's, those are big shoes to fill. My question about bringing Ernie or Remington, and our professional from planner over to engineer is, ultimately, then we're losing the continuity of, who we had as planner. And it's I've thought about this, and I think about it from two perspectives. There's, I don't know if Remington identified who their professional would be in their bid for engineer.
Ernie.
Did they specify Ernie?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure they did. Let me pull it out here, hold on. I'm pretty sure it was Ernie. It's in here somewhere. Yes, it does. It specifies Ernie.
Yeah.
Through the chair,
I
if
mean,
may.
I'm curious, you know, because I don't know if you made a motion or just
No,
suggested
I'm
an
just
idea.
talking.
I guess I'm curious, you know, I think you have very grounded thoughts around things, and I'm curious, like, you know, how does that, what's your opinion on how that helps us? We're gonna have to have someone new. And,
So here was my thought behind it, okay? My thought behind moving, not asking, but having Remington and Vernick serve as engineer, have Ernie move over to the engineer role. He can then work with the planner to roll he's done. So right? So I thought it would be better to have him in the new role with his experience, and then he can work with the new, whatever, we haven't gotten there yet, but whoever the new planner ends up being. So my thought was it's better to have his experience in the engineer role, and then he can work well and work alongside with the planner and bring them along and teach them all the different, like I said, we've heard how they have these pre-meetings and they talk to the county and they do this. There's a lot more
Right.
involved than just coming to a meeting. So that's my thought.
so I guess my kind of other thought, sort of thinking about it in the big picture, is like, then we're essentially, well, I agree with you that I don't think it's a good idea to have one professional fill two roles. I think if you know that this is your capacity, you're sort of more focused on looking out for those things, and I think that's a benefit for us if that professional has that focus. And so I guess the question would be, who would then, right, we're basically pulling, a tried and true from one position, considering putting him in another position, and then we also then, like, for me, part of that decision would be thinking about who the other options are and sort of on balancing, like, you know, alternatives, like if we could choose to have Ernie in one of the positions and have the continuity and the experience that he brings and you know, all of that to one of the two positions. And then I guess the question would be, what are the alternatives if he's in position A? You know, who are our other alternatives? Then kind of try it on for size on the other side, and then sort of, to me, it has to be part of the decision.
Through
Then I
the
don't know
chair,
if-
if I can get a word in.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, sorry.
Looking at the planning 3 application, I was not impressed with CME or Harbor. So I would prefer to have Mr. Peters as a planner. Also, the planner and attorneys sometimes step on each other's toes, and it's good to have somebody who's familiar with the board and when to step back and when to pick up the ball. So I would prefer to have Morgan Engineering as the engineers and have Mr. Peters as planner, since it is more logical to have one person in each job at this point, except maybe traffic engineer when we get to that. But I would be more inclined to support Morgan Engineering.
That's, if I may.
Yes.
Are you done, Dr. Hofstein?
Yes.
Okay. You know, you sort of finished my thought in a sense, like, I think for engineer right now, our RFPs are CME, Harbor, and Remington. And for planner, it's Morgan, Harbor, and, I'm sorry, Morgan, CME, and Remington. Correct?
Well, engineer, like I said, engineer, we have listed
I
Morgan and
I
Remington.
think I just flipped them. I'm sorry.
There's only 2.
Engineer is Morgan, Remington,
Morgan and Remington,
That's it.
right.
Okay, right,
And
I'm
the-
sorry.
And the planner is
And the-
Remington, CME, and
CME
Harbor.
Right. So, yeah, so thinking about, if we, say we don't want, and I would say I would not want one professional to fill two roles.
Correct.
So if we say for engineer, we want Remington, we're essentially saying we are not going to be choosing him for planner.
Correct,
So then we have CME or Harbor as our options.
correct.
So I just don't know Harbor. I tried to look around. I haven't seen them in our town, not on any boards, not in any developer, like not on, as an applicant's professional. I just don't have confidence that they are really involved in the town, understand the lay of the land, the ordinances, the zoning, the master plan. I just haven't seen them around, so I don't have a confidence that that would be a good fit for us in this position. And CME, they are doing some work in the town, and there actually were one of the things I tried to do as well is watch some meetings of the different applicants, or, I don't know, RFPs. And I would feel like for planner, I would choose Ernie over what I've seen from CME for now, for this. And so that sort of, for me, like, locks him into planner for me, and therefore, like, when you suggested moving him over, to me, I can't consider, I appreciate the thought, but I can't really consider it without also considering what that does to the other decision. And so I wouldn't support that because it boxes me into a place that I'm not so happy about on the planning side. So that would be my concern with, with appointing Remington and Ernie for engineer.
Mr. Hudak, any comments?
I'm dumbfounded. I think it's shameful, the orchestration that is happening here tonight. It's a shame. And the township is the one that suffers. We're supposed to be apolitical, not involved with politics at all, supposed to be an independent board. And what we're seeing here tonight is people that are in power in Jackson, that have influence and connived with board members to get their will. And I won't be part of it. It's awful.
Mr. Purpuro, I don't know if this is appropriate, so Brent or Mr. Murphy, please feel free to stop me if my question is not appropriate. Jeff, I'm curious if I'm allowed to ask him his input as someone who has to work with the
Absolutely,
professionals.
he's not a professional, he's the zoning officer of the township, representing an administrative officer, and he's a liaison to the zoning board, you're permitted.
Thank you. Mr. Purpuro?
Well,
would like
just
your thoughts.
the one thought I had with the Remington and Vernix RFP, I thought I saw that there was a choice, so to speak, between Ernie and Alan Dittenhofer. Is his name not on that RFP?
Yes. His name is on it.
It is on it.
Okay.
Both names listed.
So I just wanted to make sure I read it correctly.
So then what you're saying, well, I don't want to assume, let me ask you, is what you're saying, Brent, don't laugh at me. He looked up and laughed, I was like, thanks. Is what you're saying, so then conceptually, we could appoint Remington and Vernick, but two different people, one is an engineer, one is a planner? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying that it appears as though they gave you options for the engineer.
Okay.
Is it,
I'm sorry.
is it customary to have one firm with two different professionals fill in the two different roles? I'm just curious. I feel like I've always seen, not that I've seen that much, but I've always seen two different firms.
There is no usual or customary. In other municipalities, you know, they're, depending on the scope of work and the size of projects, and you can certainly have multiple professionals from the same firm filling different roles. That is not uncommon. I
Okay.
think if you were to look around the state or do a survey, you would see that occurs.
Okay,
And
I
it-
guess I haven't seen a
Just,
lot.
just to follow up, for one example is actually Remington Vernick. They are both the planner and engineer in Berkeley Township, so their zoning board, and I believe planning board as well.
Thank you. Any other comments, input?
Can I ask, what would be an advantage of having the same firm with the two? Is there an advantage or a disadvantage? Like, I'm just curious.
Well, so I'm going to squarely put my manager at work hat on right now. The advantage to me would be you have two people who work together and know one another. So here, this goes back to my concern about the change, with so much change, with losing Evan and all that experience. Having two people who work together, like I said, my thought for moving Ernie over was because we'd be losing that experience. But if we were to appoint the other engineer from Remington, if we were to appoint the other gentleman, from Remington and Vernon to engineer and leave Ernie a planner or vice versa, you now have two people who work well together, who have worked together, who know one another, and it won't be the same as having Evan, obviously, but there'll be some continuity there, in thought and vision, I would think. And again, Ernie's worked in Jackson for many, many years. Remington and Vernon has been in Jackson for many, many years. So I think that, I don't want to lose that knowledge in any way, and having two from the same firm, may be an advantage that we hadn't thought about.
Through the chair.
Yes.
To play devil's advocate, and I'm really kind of, trying your idea on for size, and, on the flip side, like, Ernie's reports as planner have been thorough and sort of, hit the nail on the head, and there's, having him fill the role of planner, rather than, like, we're already getting a new engineer. Maybe let's not touch planning
Well,
and
that's
say,
what I'm
that's a
saying.
professional
Well,
that
they gave
is,
us, they gave us another option, as
Right.
Mr. Pepero pointed out. There's a way to have some continuity and have people who work
Meaning-
together and someone who's,
Would your position now be, okay, so you would think to keep Ernie as the planner and bring Remington in as the engineer? I'm just trying to understand
right,
what you're
you could
suggesting.
in that way, because you still have if we appointed someone else as a new engineer, Ernie's still going to have to train, for lack of a better phrase, this new person, correct? Ernie's still going to have to train this person,
I mean-
teach them, excuse me?
Are we allowed to ask a question to Ernie himself?
Mr. Pullman, Mr. Murphy?
Process, it's being done in public appropriately. So to the extent that members of the board have any questions for anybody who submitted their credentials to them for consideration to appoint them for a position, it would be wholly appropriate for you to raise those questions. It would not be inappropriate in any way.
I do concur with Mr. Pullman.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Peters, my understanding from Alan Dittenhofer is that he is not a practicing, not looking to take on this role to be either engineer or planner in the town. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Right, so I think that this question that we're debating of whether or not Alan is the second option on the RFP, I don't really think that it was true. His name is on there, but from what I understood from him was that would be only for Ernie. Thank you.
Okay, just one more
Can
comment.
I ask a question to Ernie as well? Oh, go ahead, Dr.
Okay,
Gonzalez. I mean, Madam
person
Chair.
we have on board for engineer, is more cut and dry. There are certain rules in engineering that must be followed. and certain laws that must be followed, and it's more technical. When it comes to planner, there's a lot of leeway, there's some interpretation, and I think Mr. Peters does that fantastically, and we saw somebody who can do the technical stuff, and I think we should stick with a firm that can do the technical things that the board requires on these applications, and I would go with a different firm than Remington on engineer.
Well, obviously, it was in the RFP, so we would have had no way of knowing that Mr. Dittenhofer really wasn't going to serve in that
Well, that
capacity.
sort of clinches it.
Right, so, but I do want to just make one point. As far as the technical stuff, it's my understanding that Mr. Peters serves as engineer in other places. So he is well familiar with that. But back to I would agree with you that obviously since Mr. Dittenhofer can't fill that role, and we don't want to lose, obviously, Ernie's expertise, I would have no problem then, I don't think we need to lose Ernie, is what I'm trying to say. We've had enough change, we need to have some continuity, we don't want to lose his knowledge and his expertise. I'm going to put you on the spot here, though, forgive me, don't yell at me. Do you have a preference?
I want to do what works for best for the town.
Smart answer.
I feel as though I've worked with just about everyone on the board in some capacity over the last 20 or 25 years. Whatever works best for the town. I'm happy to be the backup for everything else. I've had an opportunity to have any number of positions in the municipality. I'm grateful for that. Whatever works best for you, the zoning board, and the town, I'm happy to take on. We're certainly qualified to do any of the tasks to the extent that I can be the backup for other folks. I think that's part of I don't want to sound overly confident, but I think that's part of the confidence that our firm can give you. Regardless of the position that we have the experience of having been here as the town engineer, as the town planner, as the planning board's consultants, as well as the zoning board's consultants and the utility authority's consultants. So the knowledge that we have certainly can be shared with other consultants. People come in, people come out. It's just how life goes. Consultants come in, consultants come out. Whatever works best for the board so that there's continuity, we're happy to do.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I put you on the spot like that. Okay, well, that being said, I think we go back to our original discussion then. We don't want to lose, obviously, Mr. Peters in that role. So I would be willing to support Morgan Engineering as the engineer as well. Any additional comments?
Are you asking for a form of motion, or?
I was going to say if anybody would like to make a motion.
I would just make one more comment. From my speaking with Mark Romar from Morgan Engineering, I was impressed that he actually does have intimate knowledge with the town. He did work for TNM Associates doing the engineering for this town, so he has done that for many years. He is currently, I believe, representing another project in town here, and I do think that he has specifically knowledge in the Jackson Township.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Morgan Engineering as the zoning board engineer, and hopefully they can assign this person, Mark, if possible, to represent them.
I would second
I'll
that.
second that motion.
I would just like to make a comment. You're mentioning Mark several times, but the RFP mentions Matthew. Not the same person, correct?
The RFP has Matthew, and it has Mark, and it has Frank Sadeghi. It has 3 names on there. So I would say, specifically that, Mark has, done more work in the town for a longer period of time than Matthew has. Matthew actually has come before this board numerous times, and I think that Mark would be a good representative for this board.
So, Madam Chair, would the bid be then, or the motion be for Morgan Engineering Services, and Mark Raymer being the main person, naming the firm with them so they can alternate if they have to.
Madam Chair, I would recommend that any approval for the firm role
For the firm.
request separate approval. There's a specific engineer that we should hear proceedings, but I would not recommend the board identify approval resolution
Correct.
specific engineer. I don't think that's the application.
So we have a motion and a second to appoint Morgan Engineering as the engineer for the town.
Yes.
For the chair, just to clarify, I don't, Dr. Hopson said he didn't
No, you
hear,
couldn't hear what
he
you-
didn't hear
Oh.
Brent's response. His explanation, I believe, is that when we...
Let Brent put that on the
Okay.
record, please.
Sorry, Dr. Hofstein, I
Yeah.
apologize.
Okay, now
I
I
usually
can-
speak loud enough, I didn't have the microphone. What we would recommend, I would recommend, is that the board appoint the firm for a position and make a
Okay.
request. If there is a specific engineer, they wish to be their consulting engineer, but not take an actual resolution to appoint an individual, as it's the firm that has submitted the proposal.
Okay.
I concur, Madam
agree.
Chair.
I'll just use the firm name. Yeah.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor to appoint Morgan Engineering as the zoning board attorney.
Engineer.
Oh, Jesus.
Zoning board engineer.
Engineer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein?
Yes?
Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnas?
Yes.
Ms. Rosal? Mr. Bressy?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. So Morgan Engineering has been approved. We also need a conflict engineer. You heard Mr. Peters. Remington was the other applicant. Anybody, discussion as far as a conflict engineer?
I think it's a good idea.
I mean, there's only one other proposal.
Would you like to make a motion?
I would make the motion, yes, for RV as the conflict engineer.
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to name Remington and Vernick as the conflict engineer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein?
Yes?
Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnas?
Yes.
Ms. Rosal? Mr. Bressy?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. Well, hopefully after that discussion, this one should be an easy one. The planner, the zoning board planner. We have Remington and Vernick, we have CME Associates and Harbor Consultants. Comments, questions?
Should we make any comments, or we heard them already?
Well, that's why I said this should be an easy discussion.
I personally would like to make a motion. I've worked with Ernie for so many years. I worked with him up to last year at the planning board, and his expertise in the whole area here, of Mountain Ocean County and Jackson especially, I definitely make the recommendation for Remington and Vernick.
I would
I'll second
second.
that, and I agree. Working with Ernie has always been a pleasure, and he's always there to answer any questions that we have at any time. So I would second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second to name Remington and Vernick as the zoning board planner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein?
Yes?
Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnas?
Yes.
Ms. Rosal? Mr. Bressy?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. We now have the traffic engineer, and the two RFPs are from Remington and Vernick and CME. Questions, comments, discussion?
I would think we've been at a disadvantage by not having a traffic engineer. We have, sometimes Mr. Peters pinch hits, but we need somebody who can, who is a graduate engineer and is an expert in traffic engineering to represent us. Every applicant comes in with their usually one firm that represents them, and I find we're at a disadvantage when it comes to that. And traffic is always a major issue with the public, though they may not, they don't understand a lot of times that it's the traffic at the site that is the issue. Traffic on the roads leading to it is not a board problem, but it's good to have somebody who is qualified to represent us.
I agree with that as well.
I'm actually, just if I may, many of our applications don't require traffic, so I'm just thinking like practically, how does that work? Because the way we've had it is sort of very convenient.
I could
where-
answer that for you. Previously, when we had a traffic engineer, he was not asked to come down unless
Okay.
there was a traffic issue, and the applicant had their traffic engineer come down. Otherwise, they didn't come to every meeting.
Okay. And,
Just a question? I just want to know, like, I didn't notice a specific application or RFP for a traffic engineer. Is that, like, supposed to be specifically different than the regular engineer? Excuse my ignorance, but I didn't notice that specifically being different. How is that? Meaning, I know that, Ernie, I believe, is supposed to be a traffic engineer.
he wasn't even our engineer, he was our planner, though.
So
He's
there
been
is
our.
a- I'm sorry, forgive me.
Oh, go ahead.
Let me just answer your first question. I apologize. They do have a separate, I can't tell you what page it was. There were so many pages in RFPs. But they did, CME did submit a specific one for Board of Adjustment Traffic Engineer. Ernie kind of pitch hit for us at the phrase that Dr. Hofstein used, because he is a traffic engineer. He pitch hit for us because, like Ms. Parnas pointed out, not every application requires a traffic engineer. We have 6-foot fences, we have things like that. They don't require a traffic engineer. So Ernie, Remington and Vernon kind of pinch him once Mr. Miskovich retired. But CME did submit a separate one, and I'm pretty sure the other one mentioned both. Yeah, right? It did. Yeah. And I'm saying Remington's mentioned both.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead now, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, I don't remember seeing, like, options. Who are our options?
Oh, Remington and
It's
Vernick
Remington
and
and CME.
CME.
Because I also didn't see it as sort of like a separate category. Like, I
It's
don't
all the
even
way at
think
the
on
back.
Dawn's summary,
Oh, yeah.
it was on there?
Yeah.
And it said, oh, okay, my bad.
Perhaps it might help.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Murphy.
Perhaps it might help to provide the board with some guidance on this particular issue.
Please.
With regard to the traffic engineer, we do have one. We did. It was Ernie Peters from Remington and Vernick. And again, I know Mr. Miskovich was the traffic engineer prior. I did not have the pleasure of working with him. I do believe it's important to have a traffic engineer based upon certain case law. There was a case out of East Brunswick where the board had made some determinations as to traffic. They did not have a traffic engineer. The determinations made as to traffic were in direct contradiction of what the applicant had testified to, or the applicant's engineer had testified to. The appellate division did not look kindly on that. So again, I think it's important that the board appoint a traffic engineer. I don't have any issue with the comments that were made with regard to having a separate traffic engineer, although I also don't have an issue with Mr. Peters also acting in that capacity. So hopefully that provides some guidance to the board, but we absolutely need a traffic engineer, whether we deal with applications that involve traffic or not, because we do have several that do.
Madam Chair, can I say something?
Yes,
I think agreeing with the attorney and in the current climate with the school redistricting, no one knows what's going on, including the Board of Education. So right now, not only do I think having a specific engineer just to deal with traffic is crucial, I think it's necessary and it's a responsibility that we owe the town. Because right now, coming from someone that I ran for Board of Education, some of the issues that were addressed with me, traffic is going to be, it's literally one of the, probably the top priority their high schoolers are getting to this side, this side. So I think the most responsible thing would be to have an engineer who's focused specifically on traffic instead of having an engineer spread thin, dealing with, like you said, fences and this and that, where if we had one engineer, their main focus. And then, even if problems and issues came up with traffic, we have that one engineer that we can go to where we don't have to burden Ernie and his team trying to figure out who is pinch hitting for an issue which I think is significant right now in town. So,
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I do as well. I
Yeah.
do as well. And, we've had a lot of applications come before us, as you all know, and, the other issue we have in Jackson, as you're all well aware, is we have a lot of county roads, traffic, where we have no control over what the county does or doesn't do and timing of that. So I do believe it's important that we have a traffic engineer as well.
I will actually say, I think CME is working on our master plan. And so I think about the master plan as being basically the opposite of the zoning board, where we're kind of dealing with the fallout of, where the big picture didn't really properly address this specific property. But, having that familiarity with it as filling in as our traffic engineer, I think could be a benefit. And having a dedicated engineer, and I was just thinking practically, like, I just felt like it would be very wasteful to have a traffic engineer here at every meeting. But if we could, selectively choose which, obviously we know the agenda, we know which ones are, have a traffic impact, which applications might require that, that I think I would appreciate as well having that, like, hyper-focus when, I guess similarly to when I was saying, having one person in planning versus engineer, similar thoughts about traffic, where if that's all you're here for, that's what you're going to zero in on, you're going to rip the application, apart with that focus, and really make sure that everything's addressed. So I think it definitely sounds like a benefit to me.
Jeff, I know in my time here, when Mr. Miskovich was here, he was here all the time. Is my memory not right?
He seemed to have been here most every meeting, and maybe those are the nights where we needed him to give testimony. We'll only send the applications to the traffic engineer when it's applicable.
So I was remiss when we did our motion for the planner, we didn't do a conflict planner. So we'll do the traffic engineer and then go back to that, forgive me. So if someone would like to make a motion for a traffic engineer, unless there's other questions or comments? I'm like, okay.
Well, is anybody here familiar with CME at all?
In the,
I don't know, I've never,
excuse me, they're currently working on our master
oh, okay,
plan.
all right, so,
CME is currently retained by the township to serve as the consultant for their master plan.
okay.
I have a question.
It's a pretty good job.
Mr. Peters, if Remington Verdict had the traffic engineer, who would that be? Would that be a separate person other than yourself?
Yes, our firm has professional transportation operations engineers. We simply
That's
didn't
what I
list them
thought.
because they do the reviews. I come to the meeting. If you need someone to come to the meeting and be a professional transportation operation engineer, it's a subset of professional engineering. I'm a professional engineer, I'm a professional planner, I'm a certified municipal engineer. So having a professional transportation operations engineer, if you wanted to have us be the named traffic engineer, I'll get you a list of the folks in my office that have the PTOE specialization, if you'd like to review them. If not, and you want to simply have us as the conflict in case that's necessary, we can do that as well. But unfortunately, in our proposal, I don't believe I listed a professional transportation operation engineer. That's on me. I'm familiar with the PTOE over at CME. You're well served by that individual as well. Again, whatever works best for the municipality. I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that our firm is the Township's traffic analysis engineer.
Oh,
Thank you.
Just one quick, with
No,
with
no,
Ernie, Mr. Peters? Would this person be considered an expert witness?
Yes.
Okay, that's,
I'm sorry, what did you say, Mr. Wilson? Yes, Mr. Hudak.
So personally, I feel as though we would get more continuity and have Ernie's input if we chose Remington Nordic to also be the traffic engineer, and he would be working closely with that person, and he could also determine whether that person needs to show up or not for each of these meetings. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Remington Nordic to be our traffic engineer. As far as the conflict goes, so I think we should choose another firm. We want another opinion. So I'll make the motion for traffic.
I would
I
second that
second that
motion.
motion too. I think it's, no, Ernie, then you bring up a good point, Bob, that they can work close together. He can dictate when we have to have here and stuff. It's just a perfect marriage. I'd make the motion for Remington Burdick, second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to name Remington and Vernick as our traffic engineer.
Miss-
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein?
yes.
Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnas?
yes.
Ms. Rosal? Mr. Bressy?
Yes,
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. So we also need a motion and a second for the conflict traffic engineer, which obviously we're left with, not left with, excuse me, that's not the proper way to state that. Our option is CME.
I'll make a motion.
Second,
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein?
yes.
Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnas?
Yes.
Ms. Rosal? Mr. Bressy?
yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. And as I said, I was remiss, we did not select a conflict planner. I'm sorry?
Anytime Mr. Peters has to come down, somebody from his firm came down, because don't forget, we approved the firm,
Correct.
so.
I said Remington and
Yeah,
Verdict,
okay.
yes. So we did, I was remiss in that we did not select a conflict planner. So we selected Remington and Vernick as our planner, and then our choices for conflict planner are CME Associates and Harbor Consultants. Comments, discussion?
Excuse me.
Yes.
If I may, were there RFPs specifically for conflict planner? I don't think so. I think we've only gone with the conflict engineer. We've never had a conflict traffic nor a conflict
Oh, okay.
planner.
Thank you, Jeff.
Why don't we need one?
Okay, so Jeff, educate me, forgive me. Why would we need a conflict engineer but not a conflict planner?
It just seems as though that's a way we've done it over the years. For some reason, that seemed to be the position where if there ever was a conflict, the engineer seemed to be the one. We've never seemed to have a conflict with a planner. We can certainly put it out there, but perhaps if there were no RFPs, I'm not sure what the process is if there weren't RFPs for a conflict planner. I'll defer.
Well,
I
Mr.
would
Pullman
think
and
if we
Mr. Murphy-
needed- I'm sorry.
Mr. Pullman and Mr. Murphy, I'd like your, I'm just curious now because,
Pragmatic question, whether or not you actually need it. I would say in the last 10 years, how many times has the board seen that conflict arise? And that probably answers your question.
there you go. Okay. All right. And now the discussion turns to appointing an attorney. we have RFPs from Gertner Murphy, Dasty and Stager, Rothstein, Mandel, Strom, Hom, and Cipriani. I hope I said all those names right. If I didn't, I apologize. Not questions, comments, discussion?
I have a comment.
Before anybody, I'd just like to get rid of the elephant in the room, that rumors have been going around, and that outside people are getting involved in this appointment. First of all, the power resides in the board to appoint its own attorney. And according to the ethics rule given down by the state, it is not ethical for a governing body to attempt to influence the zoning board on the hire of an attorney or any other professional. So hopefully, any decision made on this is that whole issue of ethics and arm twisting and suggestions is eliminated. Fortunately, we have 3 good firms applying for the job. I have worked over the years with a number of people from those firms, and they're all fine people. So let's just get to the appointment part.
I would just like to comment on your comment. Listen, we'd all be playing games here if we admitted that obviously Mr. Martins was abundantly correct. There is obviously a very different dynamic here. I'm not sure what has transpired, who's talked to who, but there's obviously something has gone on. Mr. Hudak, I have to agree with you completely. I have no problem putting it on the record. I'm not quite sure why you brought it up now, Dr. Hofstein, but I do feel that something has gone on. What it is, I can't tell you, but obviously there's been something that's transpired. And I think it's sad because as a board, we've worked so hard to work together to serve Jackson. And this is a volunteer role, let's not forget. This is a volunteer role. We're here giving of our time to help the people. This should not become a struggle here on the board. We're supposed to all be here serving our constituents, our neighbors, our friends. So I am a little disheartened at some of the comments, some of the discussion. But that being said, listen, we're all adults here. We have to work together. So let's move forward to the discussion for attorney. Comments?
I'll probably be criticized again for making the first comment, but no problem. I have a strong feeling of Rothstein, Mandel, Strom, Holm, and Cipriani. I just don't say that because of RFPs in front of me. I say that over many years of working with that firm in so many ways, in land use, COA, Lupa, and the Township. I think they're an excellent firm. They got the years of experience. They got enough depth in the firm. And if I was to make a motion, I'd make a motion for Rothstein, Mandel, Strom, Holm, and Cipriani because of the experience.
All right, hold on.
Hold
We're
on,
not
to
having
be clear,
any
we-
motions just yet.
We,
We're-
we
if I
we can't talk about it as though it's a hypothetical. If you were, as a member of the board, you have to be very clear, Mr. Bressi, whether or not you are making a motion
I
or
said
not.
I would make a motion if they want.
So are you making a motion?
No, I didn't make the motion.
Okay.
I was very clear on that. I said I could support a motion, do it. I did.
Pending, the board can continue discussion.
Correct.
Any other comments?
I'd like to say that I appreciate continuity, and I think that our current attorney has done a wonderful job. He is available to us all the time. He's quick with his ordinances. I have to go with Ryan Murphy. Continue the job that he's been doing. He's been doing a great job and advising all of us.
Comments?
I would just second.
Hold on, Mr. Martins.
Mr. Hudak.
Mr. Hudak, just so we're clear, although you said you're going with Mr. Murphy, you're not making a motion at this point. The matter's still open for discussion. Okay.
I'll just second everything you said and about Mr. Murphy. And I think, as you remember, we didn't start off in good feet. So when I was on that side, right? But that's how things are. And since then, and working, Mr. Murphy's been a great experience. Like was said, he's always available at any time, and will call us back with any questions that I have. So I see absolutely no issues. I don't know the other ones, but I do know this one. And like I said, we didn't even start off with it on a good foot, but it's gone well so far. So
Thank you.
that's my opinion.
Dr. Hofstein?
Just, I think we should go through each firm and give everybody a hearing instead of just coming forward and saying how you're going to vote before it's discussed.
Give everybody a what?
Give everybody a turn, all the firms, make some comments on them. I think the firm of Dasty Stager, I see the senior partner or whatever is Christopher Dasty. He has been a conflict engineer for Mr. Gertner over a
You mean
couple of
conflict
years.
attorney?
Conflict attorney, and thank you. And we have worked with him, and he has done a good job. He even won a court case for the board. My problem I have with the firm is that it's young, it's big, it's moving across Ocean County, signing up town after town, and hopefully they're not getting too big to take into account what our needs are, and we do have special needs in this town when it comes to land use. Also, there's another Dasty firm, his dad, whose firm has Mr. McGuckin, who's our town attorney, and any application that is challenged in court, the representation comes from the zoning board attorney and from the town attorney, and there's some conflict just between those two firms handling it, and I don't know what the relationship is there with either of them. As to the firm of Rothstein, Mandel, Strom, Helm, Cipriani, the mention was that Robin LeBrew was probably going to be the attorney that represents us before the board. She has good credentials to start with, from college to Rutgers Law. Most impressive is that she clerked for Judge Grasso, who was the appointment judge for the Superior Court in Ocean County. And if there was ever a friend to Jackson, that was Judge Grasso, particularly after he followed Mr. Serpentelli, who hated this town. He was always quick to try to resolve it before the case went before him as a trial, and many times he remanded it back to the board, and the board was able, with the applicant's attorney, was able to work out some kind of compromise. So if that's a standard that she would have, and somebody she learned under, that is quite good. When it comes to Mr. Murphy, when I first came on the board, as an alternate for the few months, from March until the reorganization, the board was dominated by one person, a former judge, and nobody was able to get a word in edgewise. Mr. Murphy was at a disadvantage because he was almost overruled every time he tried to say something. After the retired judge left, Mr. Murphy did come into his own. I was very happy to see how he handled himself, and I think he's been growing over the months that he's been left to use his own powers. And he's let us conduct the hearings when we needed to. He gives suggestions if to the chair to ask questions if he feels that they're being missed, particularly when we've had a lot of new members and inexperienced members that have been on the board. And he does actively draw out the relevant information from the witnesses and make sure that the record shows that. And also, what he does not do is tell us how to vote, which is very important. I mean, all the professionals give us advice, we make the final decision. So, and what he does give is continuity that everybody's been looking for, particularly when we have some new people coming aboard. So those are things to consider, and I'll let other people make their remarks.
Anyone else?
I'd just like to add something to Mr. Sheldon's comments. You mentioned Robin LeBeau. In land use, there's other ends of land use that she's great expertise in, and that's COA, which really burdens all land use all the time. She's very familiar with that, and I've seen her in working when I was with the council as COA representative with COA and stuff, and her knowledge was extreme. That would just add to the company that she was to be the one here as far as planning and zoning. She's well into that too.
Any other comments? I came on the board as someone not knowing anything about municipal land use law. Mr. Gertner was the attorney at the time. I learned a lot. I worked with some people who'd been here for quite some time. Our professionals were extremely helpful. When Mr. Murphy would substitute for Mr. Gertner, he was extremely helpful. He explained things in language that I could understand and not necessarily in legalese. I found that extremely helpful because, again, I came on the board to help the people of Jackson and to help them understand. Standing up at this podium sometimes is very daunting to some because they don't understand. They don't understand why they need a fence, why they need a variance for a fence, or why they can't put their shed where they want. It's our responsibility to help them understand, and I think that Mr. Murphy's done a great job at that. I think that I will piggyback on Dr. Hofstein's comment and applaud him for bringing it up. I admired how that was a tough position to be in for anybody. And I admired how he handled that. When you have somebody with that wealth of knowledge, right, with that wealth of knowledge, it can be difficult because you're the attorney for the zoning board. He's a member at this point, and Mr. Murphy had to help him try to learn that he was not the judge in this capacity. And I admired the way he handled that. When concerns were raised to him, for example, I know that concerns were raised to him about timing on resolutions and things like that. He made a definite effort to improve on that, but again, he inherited some things that he had to help get cleaned up. And we also have to remember, he had some very new members. He was educating a lot of us as we were going along. As far as availability, I could never complain. Any question I have, Mr. Murphy, this was just said, like, what does this mean for us as a zoning board? I ask his opinion all the time. I may have gotten him in trouble today asking a question about something because he hadn't been reappointed yet. So if I did, I do apologize for putting you in that position. Mr. Pullman, not to embarrass you at this moment, but the relationship between the two of you, I admire that. I see how you work together. You don't always agree, but that's okay. But you work together, and I see, and I applaud the two of you for that because you don't always agree, but you work together and do what's best for everybody. Again, you heard my comments earlier when we were talking about engineer and planner. I like the continuity. I think that Mr. Murphy's experience here in Jackson speaks for itself. I think in a short time, the board has transitioned until this evening, into a board that really worked well together. I think a lot of that goes to Mr. Murphy's, the way he handles things and the way he deals with all of us. And Mr. Martins, you're right, you didn't get off to a great start, but you know what? The one thing you both did was you treated each other with respect, and when you came upon the board, you worked together. That's a lot to be said. We're all professionals here. We all have other jobs, and that's not always the easiest thing to do. So for me, as the board chairwoman, I have to tell you, he's been a tremendous resource. Even though listen, no disrespect, I found the RFPs of the other two firms extremely impressive, a lot of great experience, but I don't think that any of them surpassed Mr. Murphy's experience or knowledge on any of the different topics that have been brought up. And because he's done such a good job in working with this zoning board, I would like to see Mr. Murphy continue.
Looking for a motion?
I was just waiting to see if anybody else was going to speak up. One thing I try to do all the time is try to give everybody a chance to, well, again, you heard people talk. We didn't always have that. It was a little difficult at times, so I try to make sure everybody has a chance to speak.
I'll make a motion to reappoint Mayor Murphy.
We have a motion, second? I will second that motion, obviously. We have a motion and a second to reappoint Mr. Murphy as the board attorney. Any additional comments or questions before we vote?
If I may, I like Dr. Hofstein's idea of kind of going through, the firms and sort of weighing and evaluating each one on their merit. And I think that there's a lot to be said for experience, and when I hear the word continuity, I don't know for me it's like experience in general with the township, with understanding what's going on, what has gone on, the ordinances, the different zones in the master plan and land use law sort of all weigh in. So I don't look at it only as, continuity, but as like just experience as a whole in the specific knowledge that would help that professional kind of guide us. I will say that Mr. Murphy has, just to kind of work through them, has definitely shown a lot of commitment to and dedication to, to the board and to his role in the board. I, as a new member, like when I joined, I really didn't know anything, and I've learned a lot from all the professionals in general. But they've all been available to me and offered their time. And sometimes I would be like, I'm not sure if this is really a question, in my capacity as a zoning board member. I don't know. This is a question that came up. Help me, and Jeff as well helped me with. Is this a question that I should be contemplating? So and just I appreciate all of everyone's time, but we're talking about Mr. Murphy. I definitely appreciate how committed he was to, has always been to his role and to, trying to do a good job and represent us. I don't know the firm Dasty. I guess, you made a motion, and I kind of feel like I did try to do some due diligence on the different firms, and I did actually, like I said, I tried to get a sense, but I don't feel like I got the best handle on that firm. So I've heard Dr. Hofstein's comments. I'd be curious. And the final firm, there's way too many names. I can't rattle them all off. But it does seem like they actually have very extensive knowledge in, and have been very involved in different aspects of the town and in different facets of land use law. And I think that there's definitely a lot to be said for that as well. I'm curious, before, I know a motion was made, and I don't know if it's appropriate to kind of continue deliberations. I know you asked, and I didn't speak up, but I would be inclined to hear a little, to have a little more discussion before a motion. I don't know if that's.
Brent, I saw you look my way.
Just so you know, Madam Chairwoman, when there's a motion pending, there can be discussion on the pending motion. So to the
Okay.
extent there's discussion on the pending motion, that's permissible, but it has to be limited to the item, the action that's before the board at this point.
Okay.
I'd like to respond to something she just said. You brought up, you went through it, and you saw the extents of Rubenstein, Mandel, Strom, Holman, Saprini, okay? Saprini. And you hit it on the head. In Jackson, they probably know more about the Jackson master plans over the last 15 years than any other attorney in this room. They also put together plans for COA. I believe they started around round 1. I think they started plan 2, 3, and 4. They were involved in doing COA at that time. So you talk about being well-rounded in the town for so many years. From the beginning of it, the ordinances, the zoning, the master plans, they were always part of it up till a couple of years ago. So you hit it right on the head, what you were reading, that's what's in there, and that's factual.
Well, if you're going to go
Excuse
all the
me, I
way
can't
back
hear
there to COA,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Dr. Hobson.
to the COA, the affordable housing. Affordable housing was decided by a judge. And it had nothing to do with the town. The town was forced into an agreement where either you.
Madam Chairwoman, I'm just
And I know we're
going to
getting out of
recommend,
this, but.
there's a
Okay.
Mr.
I
Hudak,
would
Madam
agree.
Chairwoman,
Well,
I just have to recommend to the board that the conversation be limited to the motion that is currently pending before the board. And also, I would like to remind the board that a public discussion on the merits of COA would not be appropriate before this board at this time. This board is not involved in the determination of the township's response to its COA obligation, to its fair share obligation. And I would caution anybody on making any public comments about that. Right now, there is a motion before the board for the reappointment of Gertner Murphy. Discussion should be limited to that item. And I say with all due respect, and I also say for caution of protecting the members of the board, I would refrain from making any public comments about your positions on the township's COA obligation.
Thank you. Jeff, I'm going to put you on the spot again. I apologize ahead of time. You work, I know you have to work closely with Mr. Murphy as well. Your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure it's appropriate to give him my thoughts. I just know that since I've been, zoning officer, I've only dealt with Gertner Murphy's firm, as it pertains to the board. So, for me, it just, again, I'm not going to get in the way of the board's deliberation, but continuity for sure.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor to reappoint Mr. Murphy. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
No,
Dr. Hofstein?
I'll pass for a moment.
Mr.
Excuse me,
Hudak?
Excuse me, what is that? You either abstain or you vote, correct?
You have to either vote affirmatively, vote negatively, abstain, or, you can recuse if there would be a basis for any type of conflict, which I don't believe has been articulated in this matter.
Yes.
Mr. Hudak? Yes. Ms. Parnas?
Like I said in my comment, I don't I didn't really feel ready to vote on this because I didn't feel like there was enough discussion about the different options, so I would abstain.
Ms. Rosal?
So I keep hearing the word continuity, and I agree. I do think that is good to do that, but at the same time, how, the expertise of the other firm, they have something that they can give, especially for someone that's new like me, that, I know, very little on land use law. For another firm to have that expertise and knowledge and expertise, or, that experience, I think would be beneficial for us. So I would like to abstain for now.
Well, I don't think you can for now.
Oh,
You either
well, so-
vote.
You're abstaining from the matter, the question that's before the board at this time.
Okay, then yes, I will abstain.
Abstain.
Yes, she abstained.
Thank you. Mr. Bressy?
No.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
3 yeses, two noes, and 2 abstains.
Brent, 3 yeses, 2 noes, 2 abstains.
Could you please speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Is it 3 affirmative, 2 negative, and 2 abstentions?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I change my vote, or it's too late?
No, it's too late now.
So, it's a majority of voting members, but I'm going to be honest with you guys, I came here, I did not come here tonight as counsel to advise on this. I'm here as your Alupa counsel. I would have to go back and look at this. This is not something that candidly I have done in a number of years. And it is 3, 2, and 2. It's majority of eligible voting members. Can you? Well, hold on, I don't, give me, Madam Chairwoman, can we take a 10-minute recess?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 10-minute recess.
So what happens?
Mr. Pullman?
Madam Chairwoman,
I
again, I just need to be clear, I'm special counsel for the township. I was here tonight to provide legal training to the board. I've served as your attorney in other aspects. Because the board has a legal question, and I have a duty to the township to answer your questions, and doing so pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law, abstentions are not counted as no votes, and they're not treated as recusals. It satisfies the standard for a quorum, and so it becomes a majority of votes, eligible votes cast, given based on, I'm sorry, Jeff, you said the numbers were 3-2 yes.
Can I
which
just
would
ask a question?
Yes,
sorry.
but which would mean that pursuant to New Jersey state law, the motion would carry.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I did not understand when I said I abstained. I was kind of, as I said pretty clearly, I just felt like not prepared, like there was more discussion, and like after before the roll call was completed, I requested to actually vote. It wasn't like formalized. I don't want to give up my right to vote on this. I understand I said something that I didn't realize. I didn't understand the implications, and I really would like to vote.
I'd have to say at this point, one, I believe this board always did have counsel, but to ensure that there was appropriate communication and advice, I feel like I did my duty both as an attorney as to this township to provide information. Pursuant to state law, a vote has been cast, the motion carried, you've appointed counsel, he can advise you, and he is a highly ethical individual who advise you on what steps you could take after this and explain to you the process, but the motion did carry.
Okay. So the motion, Mr. Pullman, I just need one more last piece of advice here. So the motion carries, so at this point, the existing attorney stays in place?
Yes,
Okay, I just
the motion
wanna
that
make
was
sure.
before the board was for the reappointment of the law firm of Gertner Murphy. That motion carried on a 3-2 active vote versus 2 abstentions. And based on New Jersey municipal law, that carries. And so I will refrain all comment on board governance to the firm that's been appointed.
Mr. Murphy, do we now have to swear in our professionals? I can't hear you, I'm sorry, wait till you get to your seat. Excuse me?
Despite the fact that Robert's Rules of Order exists as parliamentary procedure, admittedly, attorneys aren't as familiar with it as maybe we should be, and these are sort of unusual circumstances. With that being said, I'm not quite comfortable with the fact that Ms. Parnez wanted to change her vote. Whether that negatively affects me or not. And I apologize, I'd like to take a moment to look into that particular issue as raised by Ms. Parnez, so that this vote is representative of what the board would prefer. Ms. Hudak.
You take a vote, everybody votes, and quite frankly, if she didn't know what she was voting for, then she shouldn't be sitting up on this tonight.
And no, and I,
No offense, but you cast the vote, and that's it.
and no disrespect to anyone sitting up here. We got these RFPs on November 11th, if I'm not mistaken. To say that you weren't prepared, to me, is an insult to the professionals who submitted the RFPs. And to not really to say you didn't understand what you were saying, I'm sorry, I completely disagree, and there are no do-overs, and as Mr. Pullman stated, it's carried, and we'll have to move forward. So I believe at this point, we have to swear in our professionals.
If I could just make a comment on the record, because we're discussing me, Madam Chair? If that's.
Yes.
I did do a fair amount of due diligence, and I guess what I didn't understand was what abstention means, and that, I guess, I've never considered abstaining before, and it sort of was cast by a couple of members, and I was just like, I guess I didn't feel like there was enough discussion for me to formally make a vote, and so I kind of threw out, I guess I abstain, but immediately after, when I realized that, like, wait, does that mean I never considered the impact of what abstaining meant, and basically I'm sort of recusing myself, but without recusing myself, and I guess I didn't understand exactly how that works or what that means, and so I realized I was basically giving up my right to vote, and I before the vote was even completed, I realized I don't want to do that, and so I just I guess I want to state on the record that I did not mean to abstain from casting a vote and giving up my right to vote, and I didn't understand the impact of that, and I guess that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
and I don't know if she referred to what happened with Dr. Sheldon. Sheldon at first abstained, and then he changed his vote after the attorney told him he could change his vote.
He didn't abstain, by the way. He said he needed a minute. That's very
Correct.
different.
He did
Right.
not abstain.
I guess
He said he needed
That's
a
very
minute, and that's when Mr. Pullman stepped
He-
in and clarified it.
He has
They
to
had to vote
pass.
one way or the other, so. And it says here to abstain, and then her to vote, that's what she
He
got
needed a
confused.
minute to breathe heavier or whatever. That's not abstaining.
right.
Come
So
on.
for
So I'm just going to say, you said there wasn't enough discussion. I opened the floor, I asked
Right.
for just
You're-
comments,
Excuse
questions.
me.
I asked Jeff on his opinion. Yes, Mr. Murphy.
Let's keep this civil. Listen, I'm not entirely comfortable with the procedure. If Ms. Parnaz wanted to change her vote, my gut tells me that might be permissible. But I'd like 5 minutes to look at that as I requested, because I'm not 100% sure. Now, again, I am well aware of which way that vote will go. So, this is to my own detriment, and I understand that, but this is also important. So I would like to take a moment to look at that if the board would permit.
All right, do you want to swear in the professionals first and then take your 5 minutes, or what would you like to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Gentlemen, if you would please raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before this board will represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
If you would each please state your names and your positions with the board.
Mark Romeyer, Board Engineer.
Ernie Peters, Board Planner.
Jeffrey Peporo, zoning officer.
Thank you. All right.
Welcome aboard, Mr., I'll call it Mark, because I don't want to mess up your last name. Welcome aboard. We look forward to working with you.
Would it be okay if I ask one or two questions?
Mr. Murphy,
That
can
one,
you
is
speak?
that okay, or? Okay. So it sounded like what you felt abstaining meant was, hey, I don't have enough information right now to make a vote. Give me some time. I want to vote later. Right? That's what it sounded like to me, the way you explained it. Is that correct? That's what you understood abstaining means?
when Dr. Hofstein said, like, I'll take a moment, and
Right.
then when
And you said no
Mr.
to.
Holman said, you have three options, like, I don't know why I kind of just said, oh, perfect, I need, I need some time.
You need some
and-
time.
Yeah, I just
Right,
felt
so
like
that's
I
what you
needed a
thought it
little more
meant.
time to sort of hash out my thoughts around,
Okay,
around.
okay. Because my question was gonna be, what
around-
happened between the time you abstained? What did you learn between the time you abstained and now that you have a vote, now that you
No,
want
so
to vote?
I didn't,
What's changed?
Excuse me one
But
second.
anyway.
Mr.
I'll
Pullman?
shut up.
Yeah,
Wait,
Mr.
can we
Murphy,
just- Sorry.
on the agenda this evening is to provide the board training, which is the reason that I'm here. Mr. Murphy had stated that he was looking for an opportunity to review the legal standard requirements. Would it be acceptable for me to provide the board training at this time while Mr. Murphy undertakes the review and the work that he wanted to do?
Mr. Pullman wants to leave.
You mean you don't want to get home at midnight?
Mr. Pullman, you're special counsel. What do you think about this?
I respectfully defer to the
Thank you.
counsel.
Thank you,
for-
Mr.
for the
Pullman.
board.
Always helpful. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Almost comes back to careful what you wish for. And with no disrespect, this is why these guys wanted to have this executive, not here, where then that would have been a conversation amongst us. To say that you didn't know what the word abstain was, listen, you should have then at that point said, you know, I tabled this, the doctor said I want to pass, which his verbiage was, you can say.
I agree.
And this is what I'm coming back to, careful what you wish for. This is why these guys wanted to have this back there, so we could then exactly talk about this now. It's out here.
Yeah.
And there are, like you said, unfortunately, there's no do-overs with this. That might, I think, will work with the three of us.
So, where did Mr. Pullman go?
I mean, personally, I don't see anything under Robert's Rules of Orders that would permit the vote to be changed, but I'm still searching.
I don't know where Mr. Pullman went, but.
What I read was once the results are read, they're final.
But the results weren't.
Well, Mr. Pullman,
It would be my legal opinion
And
that the
then
vote
that's
as
the count.
cast would be
But the
final.
votes weren't counted yet when I said
but
I
you
want to
said
change my vote.
abstain, not, you
No,
said
but when I
abstain.
Hold
said I
on,
want to change
okay.
my vote, the votes were not
Everybody-
We're
counted.
done.
You voted,
I did vote. I did not,
votes of town.
All right,
but
well,
when I
Mr.
said I
Pullman
want
said
to
it-
change my vote, the votes were not yet counted.
Mr. Pullman has said it's been carried. Mr. Murphy's going to review. Let's discuss whether or not we're going to go forward with the training with Brent Pullman this evening. I don't know where he went, but
Needed a break. It can't be more than half an hour, but I'll tell them to hurry up. I can't find anything on this.
That's where I was going, that's where I was going. But it makes a little sense when you said, you know, I gotta get that vote straight. 'Cause we just talked about that. Okay.
Does anybody care what I have to say?
Leaking information from executive session is illegal too.
Excuse me. Come on. Decorum, please. Ms. Cipriani and I, who I have great respect for, who is a colleague of mine who I've known for quite some time. Ms. Cipriani and I have put our heads together, and we do, and I will advise the board. Under Robert's rules, once the results are read, which they were, as 3-2 to 2, once that was read, the vote could not be changed. The record indicates, if you were to go back and watch it or listen to it, you would see that you asked to change the vote after the results of the vote were read.
Did I?
Yes. And because you asked to change your vote after the results were read, you would require the consent of the entire board to change your vote, which it does not appear that you will get, but if you'd like to take a vote on that, we can do that.
Did I ask only after the votes were, it was like memorialized or finalized?
Respectfully, yes. And again, I wasn't trying to take away your vote, and quite frankly, I did, again, Ms. Cipriani's here, and I think we're in agreement on the effect of what occurred. So I don't love it. I'll be perfectly frank with you, but that's what the parliamentary procedure is. So again, it's up to you if you'd like to take a vote as to whether the board will permit you
It
to.
would have to be 100% consensus?
Correct. Ms. Cipriani, is that how you understood it? 100% consensus, yeah. Correct. The entire board. So that would be the procedure. Hear from Ms. Parnez. Again, I don't, I'm sure everyone in this room knows me well enough to know that my reputation as ethical is certainly something I pride myself on. So I don't love the idea that Ms. Parnez feels that her vote was taken away, even though, it may have ultimately benefited me. It still doesn't sit right. So, but again, some things just simply don't sit right, and Ms. Cipriani agreed that that would be the procedure to change the vote. So.
Mr. Murphy, I got a question for you.
Yes, Mr. Such, how can I help you?
Let's say we say, fine, your vote, your vote's now you're deadlocked, 3-3.
That motion would fail.
So the motion fails, so okay.
Correct. Correct. Are there any other questions for me at this time on this issue? Okay. Ms. Parnez, would you like to make a motion? Or are you satisfied?
I'm not satisfied, but
Again, I've outlined the procedure as I understand it, and if you'd like to make a motion and see if you draw a second, and then we can take a roll call, but a decision sort of needs to be made so we can get Mr. Pullman.
I don't think that, I guess, I don't think that a vote is gonna draw a consensus, but I heard sentiment from some of the members that, you know, they wouldn't agree to allow me to actually choose to vote in a way that feels like a vote to me. So I guess my only question is, if we were to, and I'm not questioning anyone, but if we were to review the record and see that I asked the change before the vote was finalized, would that change anything? It would, I guess, even subsequently. I'm, you know, it seems like you and some others are fairly certain that I requested it too late. I definitely thought about it, like, before it was finalized, but maybe I didn't say anything. I was sort of like trying to figure out, but I'm curious if going back after the fact and see, like, if it were to be before the fact, would it change anything?
Take a shot. You're going round and round. Then make a motion.
No,
and ask the board whether or
I'm
not
not
you can do it.
talking about re-voting now. I'm saying, like, if we were to go back and find out that I actually said that I want to change it before the vote was counted,
Right, we heard you, we understand, we get it. But if you feel that you've been wrong, then ask the board to make a motion to allow you to re-vote. Take your shot. Mr. Murphy gave you your shot. You're going round and round.
I'm asking a different question. I'm saying the assumption is, the understanding is that if I asked to change my vote before it was finalized, then I would be allowed to, and after, then I'm not allowed to.
Correct.
And it seems like some people here are convinced that it happened too late, but I'm curious to go back to the record and see.
No, I think you've got it wrong.
It could be I got it wrong.
I think you're taking up way too much of the board's time on your error, your mistake.
Well, forgive me for taking your time. I apologize.
Here's what I can suggest. What I can suggest is I can advise the board of the proper procedure to deal with this type of issue prior to the next meeting. Okay? We can all take a look at I was going to try to pull it up now, but we can all take a look at the YouTube following the meeting and see when that occurred. And we can make a determination based upon the information that we have at the next meeting.
Thank you. That's what I was getting at. I appreciate it.
Is that acceptable?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Pullman, I believe the floor is yours.
If you still wish, Madam Chairman, do you want me to continue with the training tonight, or?
About how long is it?
30 minutes. I defer to the board. It's-
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. After what's carried on this evening, I'm not going to, I'm just being honest. I am not going to be able to pay attention the way you deserve, and I don't want to be disrespectful.
It's not about me, it's about the process to ensure that we comply with our requirements, and I understand that, and that's why I asked that of the board. And I will, at some point in January, we have to do it. I will come back down at that point, and understanding why. So I apologize, but we'll schedule a time in January.
No need for you to apologize. Thank you. Sorry we kept you for all this time, but thank you for your advice this evening.
Nope, it's always a pleasure to be before the board, and I will see you folks at some point.
Mr. Pullman, thank you for providing the board with guidance in my absence, or in the absence of our counsel. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. that is a decision the board can make. It can be handled now, or if you'd like to wait until the next meeting. I don't know if anybody considered the appointment of the vice chair prior to this meeting because it wasn't part of the original reorganization plan. So I would suggest that, that we advise the board, which I will do now, that at the next meeting, the board will be tasked with selecting a vice chair. I suggest that the board consider their options for vice chair. And again, if the board, it seems that the board as currently constituted would prefer to deliberate appointments for both, for professionals and the like in public. The same would be true for the vice chair position. That could also be done in public if the board feels there's a need for executive session. You know, again, I'll leave it to the discretion of the board as to whether, how you want to proceed with that. But again, I would suggest that, given the fact that some members may not have known that we needed a vice chair, I would suggest to the board that we provide an opportunity for that consideration to be made at the next meeting.
On that note, just to be clear and fair to our newest members, obviously Mr. Bressi was appointed as a regular member, so he would have a vote. What about the two alternates?
No, they would not have a vote as to the vice chair. Just for the purposes of clarifying the record, when a vote calls for the entire assembly, all 9 members would have a vote. That consists of all 7 regular members and the 2 alternates. On the majority of things that we deal with on a daily basis, whether it be the appointment of professionals, the appointment of board officers, the appointment of newspapers and the like, and the everyday applications, that's going to be limited to the 7 regular members unless one of those members is unavailable, at which point the alternates would vote alternate 1, followed by alternate 2. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I
That just
wanted clarity
clarifies
so
the,
everybody- yes.
that should clarify the procedure going forward.
If I may, before we adjourn, there's been an issue with, where the meetings and everything could be advertised, the township. The legislature's in the middle of trying to change it because some of the newspapers, print newspapers, have gone out of business.
That's correct.
As of now, everything is supposed to stay the same for the first 3 months of the year while they devise a bill.
That's correct.
So right now, some of the newspapers that we did advertise in are no longer going to be publishing in print. So we have to wait to see how that works out.
So oddly enough, this board has 2 reorganization meetings, which is not typical, but we do. And the January reorg is reserved for professionals, while the July reorg is reserved for board officers, unless we need one, obviously, and meeting schedule, newspaper, and the like.
That's in July.
That's correct. So as of right now, this board's 2 newspapers are the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger. Both of those are currently still in print for the OPMA purposes. So I don't really have a concern at the moment, but if that were to change based upon what the legislature comes down with, then we can address that at that time. Madam Chair, you're the chair. You can make a comment anytime you'd like.
Before we close, and I promise you I will keep this quick, again, on the record, I want to let everyone know I was completely appalled at how this went. I'm disappointed. I think my challenge to each one of you sitting up here tonight is to go home and really ask yourself, what are you doing here and why? If you're here for this town and the people of this town, bravo. If you're not, you need to reevaluate yourself. Thank you.
Before we close, I'd just like to say, welcome, Mr. Bressi, welcome, Mr. Such. I look forward to getting to know you better, Mr. Bressi. I know we've met a couple times. Mr. Such, I have not yet had the pleasure until this evening, but I look forward to getting to know both of you and working with you. And again, I think you heard the comments from some of the board members. I do make myself available. I will give you my cell phone if you'd like it. I'm available to the board members pretty much 24/7, unless I tell you otherwise. But in all sincerity, I do have a great respect for this job. In fact, if you listen to me long enough, you'll hear me tell you I love it, and that's the truth. So I'm here to assist you in any manner that you might need. So again, anytime.
Aye.